As pleased as I am with my previous video discussing the 24 per pixel images from LRO, I regret to say that I may have opened myself up to being accused of making a red herring fallacy. It was hyped by NASA, ASU and the media that in all but the Apollo 11 photographs you could see that the American flag was still standing. But apart from how poor the resolution is, I talked more about the inconsistencies regarding the rover tracks and lighting. I said almost nothing about the flags. Even as I was uploading the video, I felt that I could have said more about them, the things everyone was talking about. But after I posted my video, I learned of something that ultimately gives me the opportunity to rectify that and throw yet another monkey wrench into NASA's hype. For this one, I must really give kudos to Russian-speaking YouTube user Moonfakery. He mirrors my videos with Russian subtitles. He posted a number of comments on my video informing me of a huge inconsistency between the Soviet and American space programs. In summary, on all 6 Apollo missions, NASA claims that an American flag was erected.
This has got to be one of the most proud moments of my life, I guarantee you.
In 2012, they released new images of the alleged Apollos 11, 12, 15 and 16 sites and claimed that the flag was still standing in all but the Apollo 11, whose flag was allegedly blown over by the LRO exhaust. Now, in these enlargements, we can see an elongated blob of grey pixels and a much wider patch of black pixels beside it. NASA claims that this is the flag casting a shadow. Now, I am not going to comment on the horrendousness of the picture quality, because that's already been done to death. Instead, let's ask ourselves, is there really any reason to believe that the flags would still be standing after 40 plus years? The moon is constantly exposed to heat, radiation, and micrometeoroids. Even in Earth orbit, objects have been launched into space by the shuttle and then retrieved some years later to be brought back to the Earth. And post-flight inspection always shows some deterioration by this space weathering. And these spacecrafts are made of metal. How would a flimsy nylon flag hold up against such abuse? For direct comparison, in 1991, a Soviet Union flag was erected outside the Mir space station. Vladimir Siromyatnikov was an expert on space rendezvous and docking mechanisms. He helped design the Vostok spacecraft and later went on to design the docking mechanisms for ASTP and the Shuttle Mir program. He wrote a book called 100 Stories About Docking. Unfortunately, I have not been able to find an English copy of this book, but Moonfakery sent me a link to this online copy in Russian. Translation of this section reads as follows. A few years before the described events, a symbolic episode had happened. A Soviet flag was hoisted on a truss, deployed in 1991. The flag was bought at the local military store in the town of Leninsek at the last moment before the launch of the Progress. A few months later, the Soviet Union was gone, and 6 months later, the red flag disappeared in space. It was destroyed by cosmic winds, the famous solar wind and harmful ultraviolet, atomic oxygen and ozone residues, very aggressive on Earth as well. The other atoms and ions were also hitting the flag, at a speed of 8 km per second, and finally, micrometeorites. All that makes the outer space different from the usual earthly conditions corroded the flag of the Soviet space exploration, and it disappeared. I have also been passed this transcript of an interview with Russian space artist Andrei Sokolov, who was in direct communication with the cosmonauts aboard Mir at the time. In the beginning of June, cosmonauts Artsy, Barsky and Krikalev went to the space station. They decided to celebrate this significant occasion. At the store they bought a regular Soviet flag that hung on holidays at the entrances to government agencies, and they took it aboard the spacecraft. On the mission, during one of the spacewalks, they hoisted the red flag, previously enclosed in a frame, because there is no air in space and the flag cannot wave, on the very top of a 14-meter truss. For about a year, the flag of a non-existent country had hovered over the space station. Over time, it began falling apart. Sudden changes in temperature had an effect, as well as radiation and cosmic dust. I once asked the crew to remove the flag and bring it back to Earth, but a cosmonaut just could not perform an unscheduled EVA. This was a very complex procedure. Finally, Anatoly Solovyev went outside the space station for an EVA. I was at the Mission Control Center and asked, "Anatoly, what about the flag?" "There are 2 threads left," was the answer. The flag faded into eternity along with the great country, which paved the way to the stars for the New World. Wikipedia has a section that documents all the spacewalks carried out aboard the Mir space station. Curiously, Wikipedia mentions nothing about the flag's condition. According to this list, the Soviet flag was erected on July 27, 1991. Ptolemy Solyev's spacewalk to retrieve the flag was on September 7, 1992. This gives us a total of 408 days, or about 1.12 years. Therefore, the flag in Earth orbit was destroyed by radiation and micrometeoroids within a year. So how long would a flag on the moon have lasted? Let's compare the two environments. Firstly, we know that in Earth orbit, the radiation is not felt as strongly as it is on the lunar surface, because much of the radiation is deflected away by the Earth's magnetosphere. Needless to say, the moon basically has no atmosphere or magnetic field, so the effects of radiation will be felt more strongly. Of course, despite travelling considerably slower, the much larger rocky fragments travelling at 10 km per second will do much more noticeable damage than subatomic particles travelling at near light speed. Prior to the Apollo missions, 5 unmanned lunar orbiter missions were sent carrying micrometeoroid detector packages. They established that in the vicinity of the moon, the average rate of punctures was about half of that in Earth orbit. Okay, so if we assume that the primary damage to the flag was due to micrometeoroid impacts, then if it took 1 year to destroy a flag erected in Earth orbit, it probably would have taken twice as long to destroy a flag planted on the moon. Even before the LRO images were published, I remember seeing the trolls on the ApolloHoax.net forum having doubts themselves that the flags could have survived. Now the myth that the flags have survived and are casting shadows on the lunar surface has become international headlines. I'd wonder just how many of these reporters have bothered to correlate this claim with the Mir flag. So in summary, a hammer and sickle flag is reduced to 2 threads after being exposed for 1 year to the space weather of low Earth orbit. Yet NASA and ASU would have you believe that after 40 years, 5 stars and stripes are still standing on the moon and are still able to cast huge shadows and be photographed by an orbiting satellite. My god, poor Vladimir must have been spinning in his grave.